Today I'm reading about a sacrificial promise. God will provide the sacrifice for our sins. Abraham and Sarah were so happy to have Isaac. They were old, but God gave them lots of energy so that they could play with Isaac and teach him all the things he needed to know. As the years passed and Isaac grew into a little boy, Abraham continued to love and obey God. Abraham knew that the only possible way that Isaac could have been born was because God always kept his promises. So Abraham continued to bravely obey God. Before we keep going with Abraham's story, you need to know some words from the Bible we haven't talked about yet, words that Abraham knew well. First, you need to know the word sin. A sin is anything that someone does that is disobeying God. Adam and Eve have sinned when they disobeyed God and listened to the snake instead. And because they were the very first parents and everyone came from them, everyone else sinned too. This means there was a lot of sin in the world, and sin makes us separated from God, which is a big problem that leads to the next important word we need to learn that has to do with sin: sacrifice. God had made a rule for his people. All sin has to be punished. But because he loved them, he made a way so that they wouldn't get the whole punishment they deserved. Instead of being punished themselves, the people would have to give something special to God that could take the punishment for them. They had to give God one of their very best animals. This gift was a sacrifice. The animals weren't pets. The animals had been kept to make food or become food. So when the people gave a really good animal to God and the punishment was put on it, the people still felt bad. Giving up a good animal didn't feel happy. But sin shouldn't make us feel happy. It should make us give a sacrifice. When the people gave sacrifices, it also showed they believed God would keep his promise to give them food to eat. The people would make a special place of worship called an altar where they would pray to God and ask him to forgive their sins. Then they would put the animal on top of the altar and kill it. This might all sound sort of scary or sad, and it was. But remember how God had said there would be death because Adam and Eve ate the fruit on that one tree in the garden? Well, this was one of the kinds of death God knew had to happen because of their sin. Here's the really good, amazing, unbelievable, makes it so much better news. We don't have to kill animals anymore because of our sin. Why? Well, God is going to show us part of the answer through this story of Abraham and Isaac. Abraham knew all about killing an animal to obey God because of his sin. He had learned that God loved him and that God always keeps his promises. And Abraham knew he could trust God. One morning, with all of this in Abraham's mind, God told him to do something that is probably going to sound confusing. God told Abraham to take Isaac, the son he loved so much, up the mountain and to kill him as a sacrifice for sin. Did you hear that? God told Abraham to kill his son, the son he loved so much. Abraham definitely didn't want to do that, but he knew he must obey God. Abraham told Isaac to go with him up the mountain to give the sacrifice for their sins. Along the way, Isaac was confused and began to ask his daddy where the animal was for the sacrifice. His father told him not to worry, that God would provide the animal. Up the mountain they walked, and God showed Abraham where to stop. Abraham built an altar where he would lay the animal to be killed, only this time there wasn't an animal. His heart must have been beating so hard, and he probably had tears in his eyes as he worried that maybe God really was going to make him kill his own son. Abraham stacked the wood on the altar, and he even tied Isaac up and put him on the wood. Isaac must have been so confused and scared, and he probably cried as his daddy raised the knife in the air above him. But just then, with the knife in the air about to come down on Isaac, God spoke loudly to Abraham and said, "Abraham, Abraham." He told Abraham to put his hand down and to look in a nearby bush. There, caught in the branches, was an animal. Now Abraham could sacrifice that instead of Isaac. God had provided the sacrifice. I'm sure Abraham gave Isaac a huge hug as he took him off the altar. Abraham had obeyed God and had been willing to give God the thing he loved most, his son. So God said that he would bless Abraham and his whole family and take care of them for all generations. And there was a day coming when God would promise to give them a perfect sacrifice so we never ever have to make any sacrifices again. All right, this story came from Genesis chapter 22, and here are your questions. What is it called when we disobey God? How did God punish the people's sins? Who did God tell Abraham to sacrifice? And what did God tell Abraham when his hand was in the air with the knife? All right, guys. I'll read to y'all again tomorrow. Bye.